I'm Brian Pollock from Beaver Creek, Ohio, and you are listening to the Two Trees Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Two Trees Podcast. This podcast stars none other than John Dillon.
Hi.
That's him. And Rosemary Moeller.
Hi.
And myself.
It was so awkward.
Yours was worse.
It was not. Mine was like authentic. It was filled with emotion and friendliness.
No, it was hi.
So now you guys are wondering why I always just said my own name and just rolled right along because we didn't have this awkward way of
We don't know
opening
how
the
to
podcast.
introduce
It's a weird
ourselves.
feeling. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I myself am Martin Listener, and you are listening to the Two Trees Podcast, and boy, are we glad that you are here. We are in the middle of Season 3, somewhere in the middle, somewhere towards the end, somewhere towards we have no idea where we're at, but we are in Season 3 of the Two Trees Podcast. If you love us, even more than just listening to our wonderful voices go through the microphones and into your ears one way or another, then you can follow us on our Facebook page, The Two Trees Podcast. Just go to Facebook, click on the little magnifying glass or the search bar, whatever you want to do, and type in The Two Trees Podcast. You'll see us right there, and follow us. Doesn't cost you any amount of money to do so, but it will give you much more information that is posted by mainly John, but also some of our other people that add on to it and keep the conversation rolling throughout the week when you're waiting so patiently till next Tuesday when the next episode drops. And then if that's not enough for you, go to thetwotreespodcast.org. The main reason to go to that right now is because of the conference that's going on. That's where you can find Mike Chu, who is, we're almost halfway through the month, so you better get listening to Mike Chu because we're going to do a live event here in a week or so about that. And then Mike's going to get on and we can ask questions directly to the author about what he's talking about in Revelation. Not to spoil it for you.
That's true.
Go and listen to it, thetwotreespodcast.org, or the Facebook page. It'll be on there as well. You can click on the link and get everything that you need to know. Get into the conference. It's been a couple of months. There's archive stuff on the website, so you can go back and listen to the previous months if you want to. You won't have the live activities that we have, but you can listen to everything and enjoy it and glean from it and spread it around with your fellow friends out there in your world.
Yeah, you
well.
can actually go back and listen to the live events, the interviews, the moments with the authors. All of that is on a section of our webpage called The Archive. So if you missed the live stream, not to worry. It will live forever until we stop paying for it on the website.
At least the next month.
True.
And then we'll keep going on from there. But today, John's got a very, very special episode queued up for you guys because...
Because why?
I don't know. We don't really know what we're getting into tonight, which is my favorite.
I
Yes, it
actually
makes John
have never
squirm.
felt less prepared for recording, to be honest.
To be
And-
honest, I feel the same.
Yeah, and so does John because the outline is literally called blank number 10.
That's
and
true.
so
I have
don't think
failed
any
you
of us know what we're going to
as
talk
a
about.
podcaster.
I thought blank 9 was your best effort, but apparently you had to go on
No,
to
blank
10.
9 was a disappointment. That's why I moved. I wouldn't even use that file again. I had to move right along. Yeah, it's been a crazy couple weeks for me. I have had some family things. My son was in the hospital again. We've been 3 times in one summer. We are on a first name basis with everybody in the medical community here in Ohio. And we had some pretty exciting stuff at church. We had some baptisms and just a lot of stuff going on. I am kind of working on a book, and so that's taken a lot of my creative effort thinking that way. And so by the time I started putting my thoughts together for the podcast, it just would not be an outline. It just
so
wouldn't be
did
one.
you name this blank 10 or is blank like the default?
No, blank is what my iPad decides that things are.
I feel better about this already, guys.
Yeah, so that's basically what it is. But we're kind of pushing our way through the Gospel of Matthew. From not every verse, but we're trying to move through the main ideas of the book. And I'm trying to give you more of it than you would get just reading it on your own. And I think that's part of the fun of reading the Bible in community. It's different than if you just sit on your couch and you read it yourself because Other people are going to bring up things that jumped out to them, and it will be different than what jumped out at you. Not because the words are different, but because they've lived a different life than you have, or God has equipped them with different interests or even different sorrows. And so when you are together in a community, I always come away after having talked about it with Rose and Martin. I see it better because of you guys. So you are a huge blessing to me. But what we're hoping to talk about today is the transfiguration, where Jesus turns bright lights, and you're trying to wonder, like, why? What's the deal with this?
So, John, before we get a little bit too far into this, you mentioned something about if we had some questions about last week.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been thinking long and hard for the last several moments about the Panera that we were talking about last week.
Panera.
What was
Paneas?
it?
Yeah.
Hey, you threw me under the bus with the Panera Bread comment, and I loved it last week. But I guess one question that came up with me when I was thinking through it is, when you're talking about this place, the Paneas, and all of the evil and destruction and sacrifices that were going on right there, it seemed like that was almost a hub for that type of activity.
It was.
And we talked a lot before in our podcast about like the territorial spirits and whatnot that were going on, and all of this. Has that basically dissolved by now in this time frame?
No,
we're in now?
I don't think so. There is a different way, I think, that the spiritual world acts than it did once upon a time. The book of Deuteronomy 32 talks about how the nations were put in bondage under the sons of God, that he divided up the nations according to the number of the sons of God. And there are beings who have power over places and have power over people, nations. They try to exert their authority over them, like the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece that the book of Daniel talks about. And so what we find happen is after the resurrection of Jesus, after the crucifixion and the resurrection, Jesus more or less takes a sledgehammer to the order of Satan's kingdom. And for quite a while, he is in a full-on chaos mode as far as what's going on. And so what you had in the ancient world were these beings with a right to the places that they were. And when Christ comes, he destroys that. He cancels the debt. He nails it to the cross. And so those beings still exist, right? They didn't disappear. Instead, what they have now is they have to operate under the rules of a new system, which is that of the risen Christ. And so the church is constantly moving, constantly pushing forward or falling back, but we are invading these spaces. And in America, it's harder because we aren't a people of one ethnicity. We take great pride in the fact that we are people from every corner
pot.
of the earth, right, are welcome here. And the church is supposed to be that as well. We are not one ethnicity. We are all the ethnicities unified in our love of Jesus. And so what you'll find is that spiritual beings still have places where they are very welcome. But there is a force arrayed against them now, and that's the church of Jesus.
Because you think about it, and not to get too conspiracy-ish on here, but it seems like it's definitely more behind-the-scenes type of idea. When we talked about Paneas, it seemed like that was out in the open. Like, people knew, and it was no secret if you were walking by this place, exactly what was happening at that idea. But there seems to be some undertone of this still happening in the world today. And if you watch the news from past the puppy dog love story at the beginning, you see all of this stuff as well. But it seems to be something that's not as obvious today. Is that an accurate statement or take on that?
I think so here. It isn't that way everywhere. Like if we had Andy here, Andy grew up in India, he would have a very different reaction to this, where the Church of Jesus Christ is not the dominant force. And even just because a place claims to have Christian heritage doesn't mean that it is filled with Jesus followers.
Right.
You can slap a cross on anything and call it Christianity. As a matter of fact, the KKK is famous for this. And if there was a more un-Jesus-y group of people, you'd be hard-pressed to find it. And so what you have now is an enemy that exists in the shadows, that does seek to sway the hearts of man, but the strategy has changed. C.S. Lewis has a really great quote about this in his book, The Screwtape Letters, where he talks about different strategies. The demon wants to reveal itself to the patient. And more or less the uncle who's writing more or less says that would be a dumb thing to do. The strategy we're going for here is that he doesn't think about the spiritual world.
Right.
And so revealing yourself to him will positively make him pray and drive him into the arms of the Father. And so the idea is that where we are trying to make skeptics, we don't make magicians.
Well, the thing too, I was actually just thinking about the screw tape letters while you guys were talking, because when he's here at Peneus is where he says, "This is where up on this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it."
Right.
And in the screw tape letters, he refers to the church. He says, the demon says, "Don't let them see this as we see it."
Terrible as an army with
right?
banners.
Rooted in eternity, and terrible as an army with banners. Like, let it be the people that get on their nerves, or whatever. And so the strategy is not the same. I mean, I know this is Lewis, this isn't scripture, but I think that has really impacted me a lot,
Right.
where he's like, don't let them start thinking, because when you think, then you use reason, like dull the mind, redirect the thought, like never let them actually start arguing.
So I don't think Satan's goal or the role of what the Bible would call Babylon is to make you worship them as much as it is to enslave you and drive you from the Father. And so their goal, whether or not you worship them, I'm sure that scratches a particular itch that they have. They seem to be very pride-filled beings. But so long as you are not serving the Lord, you are under their authority. And so as far as sacred places go, those still exist. They're not going to exist in the same way as they did in the ancient world. But you will find pagan shrines, even here in Covington. There are places like this. They're not as rare as you would think that they are. But you're right. That was kind of the golden era of paganism that Jesus steps right into.
What really leads me into my next thought with this is what I was kind of trying to get to, is the way that the evil is coming at us, or the strategy, I guess is the word we've been saying, for the dark side against us. Shout out Star Wars with that dark side comment. But,
Right.
But the way that they're coming across is different here, even in the United States compared to India, what we talked about, where Andy grew up. So there's mass differences between the countries, even, let alone narrow it down to the city or the village or the household that you live in. But how do we here in the United States read the same Bible, read Paul's same letters, read Jesus' same teachings as they do on the opposite side of the world, and fight against a completely different strategy, maybe even an opposite strategy?
Yeah, that's kind of what my book is about that I'm working on. Tentatively,
segue.
It's called The Green Way, which is the idea that Eden offers us a way to do this. And so I do think there are big moments in your life where a big stance is needed. And we kind of look at life this way, especially when we're younger. I'm going to get my driver's license, and then I'm going to register to vote, and I'm going to go off to college. I'm going to get married. And then you hit this part where the next stop is like the nursing home. And it's you kind of aren't really prepared to deal with that because our youth was so spent focused on these big events.
Sure.
And our churches kind of followed along with this. Like, we long for big, flashy movements of the Holy Spirit, revival type things, or miracles. And those are the things that we press for. When ordinarily that's not the way that I resist the darkness. Instead, what I seek to do is I seek to purposefully act in a way different than Babylon. I want to do something that is infused with worship. And it can be a small thing, like Jesus says, turn the other cheek, or go with them another mile. The idea that kind of goes down to is this idea of dominion. God gave mankind dominion over the earth. And humanity, according to Babylon, like, we think of dominion as the right to do whatever we want, whenever we want. We would say dominance. But the Bible kind of talks about, if you are a leader, you are expected to serve. If you are put in power, you are expected to improve the things around you. And so, Martin, I think there are big moments like baptism or marriage, but there are also the 1,000 small moments where you are cultivating love and beauty and hope and joy, where you are growing the fruit of the Spirit, where you are long-suffering. That is a flash of light in the darkness of Babylon. And those are the things that collectively we all together are capable of pushing back Babylon, not through our own skill set, but through the power of God present in the things that we're doing.
And I think going through the Bible, the way we're trying to here in season 3 with Matthew, but just the way that we're trying to look at it. I don't want to say behind the scenes, but it's almost the story behind the story, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
That's really what's opened up my eyes a lot with this. And I'll give you a brief example here. If you'll give me a good 40-minute sermon, I got it ready in the back of my head.
Sure.
Go for it.
You know, basically, when we're talking about Matthew chapter 14, which we just went over a couple episodes ago, when Jesus feeds the 4,000 and then they're out on the ship and trying to go across, and he walks on the water directly after that. But the idea behind it, what I've taken from it, if you read through it, and I can go on forever on this because I've been talking a lot with it, but Jesus the whole time is trying to go up on the high place and talk with his Father. But he keeps getting interrupted by people that are needing his help. And so if you look at it as what Jesus did, yeah, he made bread turn into a lot more bread and fed 5,000 people. And then he walked on top of the water just to get his disciples to believe. Finally, when he gets to the other side, he takes a nap. No, he helps all these people that come to him and he heals them. So if you look at it as what Jesus is doing, I can't do any of those things.
Right.
I can't turn bread into more bread. I can't walk on water, and I can't heal people that are ill. But what Jesus is doing behind the scenes is he's trying to talk to his Father, which is loving the Lord God with all of his heart, mind, and spirit.
Correct.
And the only thing that interrupts that is his love for his other people, and he helps them. So whether you're in Ohio, whether you're in India, whether you're in Russia or Antarctica or Mars, you can see that Jesus is loving his Father and loving others the same way.
Well, and that's exactly what I hope is going to come across when the book is finished is I may not be able to miraculously provide bread for thousands of people, but I can use my oven to feed somebody. Right. I can not walk on the water, but the disciples paddled the boat. There is a sense in which either you are following or you're not.
In last episode, I said the WWJD thing.
Oh, yeah.
What would Jesus do? But the way I'm looking at it now is what is Jesus doing? WIJD. What is Jesus doing? So not what did he do, because he did a lot of things I can't do. But what is he accomplishing by doing those tasks? Let's not focus on what he did, but the why he did it or what he's doing by doing that.
Well, and I've been thinking about that quite a bit because we just had a baptism. And baptism in our tradition is not salvific. It doesn't save you. Instead, it is a sermon. It is a testimony to both the people who are there and to the spiritual world that I stand with Jesus. One of the questions that we ask when we're in the water is, do you renounce Satan and the host of darkness? And if they won't say yes, we don't go in the water. And it's a part of declaring faith, of flying the flag, of standing with Christ. And really this is present constantly for the Christian, where I know to do good, so go do it. It is as clear as your life is. It's going to be different every day of your life.
Right.
Or even when you're parenting, raising a teenager is very different from raising toddlers. Raising college kids or having grown children, you're going to have to adopt or adapt creatively in order to follow Christ. He doesn't give you a list. Say, do these 5 things and we win. Instead, he gives you a direction. And this is the way of Eden. It's the idea of the gardener. If you go out to prune trees, right, they're never the same. Even if they're the exact same species of tree that you planted the same day, they will not grow the same way.
Right.
There is not a raise your shears, 5 inches up and clip. It's going to be different. You have to be able to look at that individual plant and know what needs to be done.
And how important is Ephesians 6 to this conversation?
It is the heart of this conversation.
The armor of God and putting that on daily. But again, just think of how these things change, because the armor of God's really neat and it makes sense to you. But then when you look at it into the light of what we're talking about, what Jesus went through, like you can imagine Jesus putting on the armor of God. I know he is the armor, but you can see the translation that Paul is doing to what Jesus did with his disciples and the followers and just the random people on the street. And it really brings a different mentality to putting on the armor of God. I'm not just going to memorize a verse so I can spit it back out at you, but I'm going to be able to hopefully indwell the Holy Spirit inside of me so it can flow out to the people around me. And I think that's really what Paul's getting at there. And that just, it really puts some weight into these things that you learned when you were a little kid. And it makes it to where it can be realistically lived through your life in a day-to-day fashion. That's important.
I think that's why it is important when you're young, when you're raising a family with your children, to instill as much scripture as you can, both into yourself and into them, because you're preparing them for a future battle that they are going to need to know these things. And you trust that the Lord will guide and direct them with what they have been equipped with. I think that Aaron and I were talking about this recently, and it was a really long conversation and it got weird, but there was this moment we were talking about the world that we do live in now and that we're raising our families in. And I said it can get discouraging. Like I know that you're talking about the Way of Babylon and the Green Way and stuff, and I said it reminds me more of the scene in Jurassic Park where they, it's not the original, it's one of the newer ones, but they need to defeat this one dinosaur. And the kid says, we're going to need more teeth. And so they go let the T-Rex out to battle the one that's coming at them or something. And it's super cool. But I told her that. It's like, I always feel like we're going to need more teeth, you know? But then we continued talking. I said, it's really that the light shines in the darkness and the darkness doesn't overcome it. You know, it's not through our strength. We do put on the armor. We do show up for the battle, but it's already been won. You know, the Lord is with us and he goes before us. And that's what I have been holding on to as I'm raising my toddlers into teenagers and my teens into young adults. Like it's a battle that we're all walking through. And I've asked the Lord, I was like, you've equipped me for the war, but you need to equip my children for the battle, like, you know, as they age.
Just think of the levels even that you're talking about, and we've discussed it so far. We were talking earlier about from nation to nation, or country to country, on opposite sides of the world, how, you know, Jesus in the scripture can reach through to those people. But then not only that, inside of the country, inside of the state, and inside of the city, you have even households that are taking on different battles, different strategies, different everything. And the same mentality for the Christian works within the household, works within the planet, works within creation. And just to show the power and the might that God has over his creation, the dominion, if you will, over his creation, that it doesn't matter what you're going through, where you're going through it, or how big you're going through it. Like you said, the battle is already won. It's already taken care of. We just have to show up and be faithful enough to fight. And that's really interesting to me, that there's so many different levels, and yet it works on all of them and throughout all of them.
Which, circling back around to Ephesians, when he says to take up the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Like that is back to what we were talking about knowing your scripture and not just like memorizing it, not just Martin's famous sword drills. Like, I mean, but these are all elements of it. It takes time and it takes discipline and it takes faithfulness to show up and do the reading and do the praying and let the Lord work through his word in your heart.
But I would say that's one of the least present virtues of our American society, that of faithfulness. We are really good at being excited. We are really good at being flashy. We are really good at short-term projects. The idea, though, of gardening, of planting a seed and faithfully tending and growing something strong is as un-American church as anything that I know of.
And the thing about not tending and keeping is that things will return into chaos. You
They
know,
will.
like if you give we have raised beds, and this year I said, I am taking a break from gardening because I'm too busy. Well, it only took about 5 minutes for me to realize the weeds are not going to take a break from, growing. So we've still had to weed these stupid beds all year, even though we're not growing anything in them, except volunteer pumpkins came up. So that's good. But
Well, that will cover half your yard.
it has covered the beds. You can't see the weeds. So, kudos to volunteers.
Well, I mean, let's take, for instance, a moment of history, like the first several centuries of the church. Christianity was not in power. We did not have voices in the government. The Christian movement itself was very poor. It existed on the fringes of society, and yet it toppled the empire and brought about a new world. The way it did that was through a million small acts. It wasn't one martyr's death. It was all of the martyrs. It wasn't one act of faithfulness. It was generations of constant faithfulness. But the American in us wants a movement now, right, where we step right out of chaos right into the seas are calm as glass. And that can happen. God has done that, but it isn't the normal way that he operates. Instead, he seems to be saying to a culture that has everything, be faithful. And I don't hear this much from my colleagues in ministry. I hear a whole lot about the spiritual gifts and almost nothing about the fruit of the Spirit. These are things that are Sunday school, children's stuff. When you grow up, you get into like the big boy stuff. And you don't have this emphasis on long suffering, patience, gentleness, goodness, faith. These are things that are kind of for the coloring book pages. And I think instead, they are the way we respond to the evil of the world around us. I think of the moment in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, if your enemy slaps you across the face, turn to him the other cheek. That is a cultural expression. If someone, they would backhand you, right? They would backhand you across the face. And that was a way of putting you down, of saying you are lesser than me. To turn the other cheek is to invite an open-handed slap, and which you only would do to your equal. It was also a way of saying, you didn't knock me down. I'm still on my feet. It is an act of resistance. I think that the church is not resisting. They're trying to have just a moment where they call in an airstrike and the enemy disappears, right? If we can just vote this ticket into the government, we won't have problems anymore. If we could just get prayer back in schools, we wouldn't have this problem anymore. And I'm all for prayer in schools, but there's no prayer in the homes. So I don't know what you think praying with the teachers is going to do if they won't pray with their parents. There is a problem that is deep within the American culture. And it is, in a large part, we have stopped the individual efforts of serving the Lord. Instead, we've replaced it with church projects, with big-time names on television, and we just kind of are hoping for someone to come along and do this for us. What it will take is you being what God made you to be. When Jesus goes to, I think this is really interesting, when they go to Peneus, right, and there's this moment of the showdown between the God of heaven and earth and Pan and all the other false gods, the thing that has been remembered was not Jesus flipping the tables of the money changers in Peneus or a great sermon that was preached or some great miracle. The thing that is remembered is a man spoke truth and said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That is not said enough by fathers to their children. That is not said enough by pastors from their pulpit. This idea of infusing the simple with profound power because God is in it. That is the exciting thing. I always think of like Jonah when he is sent to Nineveh. And as a pastor, I'm always reading the sermons in Scripture because I want to learn from the prophets. You know, how did they accomplish such great things? But Jonah's sermon is an absolute joke. It is, 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Why? Doesn't say. What God is mad at us? Doesn't say. Why are you being overthrown? Doesn't say nothing. As a matter of fact, the Ninevites are so freaked out about this that they even cover the cows in sackcloth. They're like, it may be a God that cares about the cows, so we better cover the cows up. Like, they have no idea, but they respond wholeheartedly with a desire to be forgiven. This is missing. And I long for it to be back. And so, Martin, going back to your question, the darkness will always be around you. And I don't have the ability to change the world around me, but I do have the ability in the moment to turn the other cheek, to speak God's words and truths over the world, to love my neighbor as myself, to be forgiving, to be merciful. I love when Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. Because he didn't say, blessed are the peaceful. He says, blessed are the peacemakers, the people who go into situations with the desire for peace. That is not the view I get of Christianity online. Instead, what I get is there is no one we would rather crucify than other Christian denominations.
Yeah.
I mean, they will straight up destroy them given the opportunity to. And I've had people email me about stuff on the podcast where I didn't say things their way. Or, hey, I belong to this denomination and we obviously have the corner and you're not toeing the line. And so they'll come tell you what they think. And I have to respond in love. Right. And also, have ears that hear. Am I wrong? I'll go think about it. But just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean that I don't love Jesus.
And I think it's past time for me to bring a sports analogy. In fact, I think John's done like the past two. So
Yeah, it's
Let's
time
have
to
it.
bring it
Is this a
back
Wayne
to our
Gretzky quote?
roots. No, but when you're looking at
Or Michael Scott quote?
yeah, Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. Anyway, so the only way a 14 seed beats a 3 seed in March Madness is death by 1,000 paper cuts.
No,
And that-
it happens when I put down the 3 seed as having won.
That's true. But again, it's not some grandiose thing. They're not going to overpower a 3 seed. They're not going to out athleticism a 3 seed.
Right.
There's no way they can. But the faithfulness to stick by what they've gone over, to be coachable, to be a team, to be a force moving forward every step, then at the end, it's your only chance to beat the number 3 seed. And that's what you're talking about. When you look at some place, especially like the American church, that's where we all are from, you see people that are very content with where they are. Go back to the first century church, they were on the outside looking in. There's a quote that I really love that says, hard times make tough guys make good times make weak guys. Mm-hmm. And then that's cyclical, because then the weak guys make hard times, and then they become tough. And it feels like we're in a cycle where America is so plentiful that there's not a desire to go out every single day to do it. I mean, imagine if you woke up and had big muscles tomorrow. Are you going to go to the gym? Why? You've already won. You already have the muscles. Like, you don't need to go to the gym. You have what you're looking for. And so when we look around at all of the many blessings that we see, are there hard times? Yes. Are you going through stuff? Absolutely. Is there stuff that comes up that you can't control? 100%. But when we're talking about the schematic way that the evil brings to us, they never do it in a fashion that makes it look unappealing to you.
That's right.
They're not going to come to you and be like, wow, you could follow me, but it's going to stink.
Well, and let me kind of pull that thought for a minute. When Satan tempts you, he doesn't normally tempt you with gigantic sins.
Right.
It's normally a small act.
But it's something
that
that's appealing to
will
you.
pull you away. It's appealing to you. You want it. But he recognizes that change does not happen dramatically, usually. It happens through the breakdown of character, through the normalization of evil, and through that 1,000 small acts of evil, we are pulled deeper and deeper out into the sea of darkness. When we resist it, we do the same.
Right.
Like, if you'd like to have a gigantic charitable act, that's awesome, but you don't get to take the month off because of how good you did last month. There is still this calling. And I love how the Bible begins with a garden and ends with a garden, that we even have Jesus raised from the dead in the garden. You have this moment where Mary is weeping for her Lord, and she looks up and she sees him, and she says, supposing him to be the gardener, she says, where have you taken him, and I will go. This is the nature of God. He is the giver of life.
But roll it with that temptation and what we talked about at the beginning of Matthew, when Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness. He doesn't ask Jesus to do something that is outside of the realm of possibility. We just talked about how he turned a couple loaves of bread into thousands of them. Mm-hmm. Satan says, make one. This is the creator of the universe. Satan knows it's the one that's going to crush his head. This guy is going to beat me unless I can get him to do one thing that is so infinitely small compared to what he did in the beginning with God, which is creating all of creation.
That's right.
Just do one little look. Nobody's around. Nobody sees what's going on. Give yourself something to eat.
Have you ever noticed how the temptations escalate?
But that's so
in their
infinitely
intensity?
small. And so when you go on your day-to-day work, you're just like, that's not really a big deal. That's infinitely
it
small
seems
compared to what
small.
I could do.
But by the end of it, Satan is saying, bow down and worship me.
Right.
He gets to his point in the end, but he doesn't introduce it that way. He's not going to do that for you either.
Right.
And God, in many ways, the spiritual world recognizes this. There is a pattern here. I don't think you will do great things for God if you won't do small things for God.
Well, it's also ironic. Well, it's probably not ironic. It's probably calculated. that
Isn't
he-
it ironic?
Yeah, don't you think? He shows up, and it's the same. It's the same thing he pulled on Eve. He's like, "Oh, here's some food. You should eat this. You should make bread. You should do this." It's like you almost want to say, "Don't fall for it," but like the horror movies where you're like, "Why are you answering the door?"
Yeah.
or whatever. But you don't have to. You don't have to, because this is Jesus, and He knows all things. And Not only that, this is something that's been pulled before. He has no originality, Satan has none. Like the things that he is going to be using, he's used before and he'll use again.
That's right.
And even in my life, like sometimes I think this feels familiar, oh yes, this is familiar, and it's like the, it's just almost like a whisper. It's never, like you said, it's never these great, big, dramatic temptings of evil where he would come, because I would see through that in a second, but I know sometimes that the things that tempt me is to love less. Like that to me is probably my hardest thing, to become angry quickly. These are all the things that I am already prone to. And they are always my biggest temptations, and they are very destructive, and they'll destroy a family and they'll destroy a community. And if he can just stick at that one person with that one thing, you never know, like, the tide that's going to be turned. But the opposite, as you said, is true as well. Like the faithfulness that comes from holding your tongue, from continuing to love, even when, man, like you have nothing left to give, but you just hold on.
I love the horror story analogy that you're going with, because you're saying, what are you doing? Just don't go. The one commercial when they're running from the evil guy, and they're like, let's hide behind the chainsaws. It's like, why can't we just get in the car? It's a spoof on horror movies. But the whole idea is the fact that when you are on the outside watching the movie, you hear the narrator speaking, you see all of the stuff around you, and you understand the decisions that they are making are completely idiotic. And that's why it's fun to watch those kinds of movies.
Well, the music alone tells you something's getting ready
Exactly.
to happen.
Why didn't they hear the music and see the footsteps and whatever? But when you're in your life, and I think this is one of the coolest sermons I ever heard, no offense, John, but Josh Nelson gave this one. He's talking about Eve in the garden, and she knows there's two trees, but then after the temptation of Satan, she says there's one tree in the middle of the garden. So her whole mentality has changed because of the temptation to where there's only one option, which is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And just after Satan attempts to talk to her, the ways she views the world is different. So if it was dark out and you were scared for your life and someone was chasing after you trying to kill you, you might also go hide behind the chainsaws because you can't see the running car, because the way that you're approaching life is differently. And that's something that Jesus does better than anybody in existence. He is able to figure out that he's being tempted while it is happening. And I think that's something that we struggle with a lot. And if you go back to my 40-minute sermon I did in 40 seconds earlier about Matthew 14, it's his ability to seek God first, to want to go up on the mountain and talk to his Father, that allows him the most, I think, to be able to decipher what's going on this pagan earth, that he can know what and when to do things.
And that's what he's doing in the Gospels. There is no doubt about it that the supernatural beings are real characters in the story. It isn't just he's dealing with generic evil. There is a unseen world swirling around Jesus, and he is combating it. And so to me, one of the interesting thoughts, and you get glimpses of it throughout the Gospel. You're about to get it on the Mount of Transfiguration, where all of a sudden Moses and Elijah are there, and you're like, where did those guys come from? And they just kind of step onto the scene. There is a bigger thing happening. Even when you get to the book of Hebrews, right, and you have this hall of faith, the end of it, the beginning of chapter 12, is this really beautiful pull to run your race, to keep pushing, to take that next step.
I think that I've been thinking that line, that therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us press on. And I love that verse. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I think that actually may be a good place to end. I know that we had an outline, but we're about 40 minutes into the episode. And
I got a million more questions, John.
Oh, go ahead.
We can go for hours.
No, let me have another one.
No, it's so fascinating. I mean, we're just sitting here chit-chatting, really. I mean, this is almost what we envisioned the podcast to be at the beginning, when we were just like, hey, we talk all night on Monday nights about just everything that we're doing. And that's what we're trying to get with the conference that we're starting, just by listening to the podcast. Like, do you have two buddies that you don't have anything in common with except Jesus? Get along with them and ask these types of questions and just see what they're going to bounce off. So we don't have to keep going forever, but it's so fascinating talking about the spiritual world, implementing what Jesus did, seeing what all the rest of the New Testament is trying to tell you about what Jesus did, and just thinking about it and meditating yourself, going in prayer, going in meditation and fasting and talking with it, and seeing how it can infect and affect your life today. And it's such a fascinating topic to talk about. I don't want to stop, but I
Well, that's
understand.
because you're the application guy.
Yeah, I know. I'm jiving.
And
here,
that's
okay?
that's where
doing
we're
good.
at. Like the calling of Christ to take up your cross and follow is not always the giant, huge, everyone is looking at you moment. It is the constant rhythm of faith to be unseen, to be unpraised, and to have done right because the Lord is with you.
Is it even safe to say that if it is a moment where there is a time for you to be looked at and at the center, that you should question, is this what I need to be doing? Like,
Yeah, early in my ministry, especially as a pastor, I thought about that a lot. There are people who are going to take what you say and just believe it because you said it. That ought to make sure that you have studied to shown yourself approved. I can get up in a pulpit and fluff for an hour, but that's not doing my flock a service. It's not honoring the God that made me. There is a calling to do something beautiful. And whether that's building something or that's working with your hands or with your mind or with your words, the church is not going to win this fight through big, flashy you moments. It's going to happen when we look like our Father.
There's some verses, starting with the ones in 1 Corinthians 13 that talks about love. And it says, that love is patient and it's kind and it keeps no record of wrongs and it endures. And sometimes when I'm not loving well, I think love sounds so naive. Like if you actually lived that way, it'd almost be to the detriment of the person you were loving. Like, how are they ever going to learn if you treat them that way? And I was like, what is the backbone of love? And then I started rereading, or not, as I read the scriptures, I would read it with love in mind. I was like, what is the backbone of love? And so some of the verses that I had collected in my reading was in, I think a Song of Solomon. He says that love is as strong as death. This is a force. And there's another verse that says that knowledge puffs up. There's different translations, but love edifies, or love strengthens the church. And these are the things that I've taken forward as I've been learning to love, like from my family and like waved outward from there too. As I try to serve other people, is to see them the way that the Lord sees them and with love. And I think that has changed me more. Good job, God. This has changed me more, than all of my always learning and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth, because I love to learn. Like that's what I love to do, but it's not always what people need. Is more knowledge and more, factoids and more wisdom. They just need love.
Well, I think Paul says it pretty well, that if you speak with the tongues of men and of angels and you have not love, you have become as a clanging cymbal, a sounding gong.
Understand all mysteries and have all knowledge.
Yeah, what is this without the nature of Jesus within us? Christ does not die for the sins of the world because he knows the answer. He does it because he loves them and because he is patient and he is strong enough to bear that burden, and because he is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, mighty and awesome.